Every year, the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, or UNFCCC, holds a formal Conference of the Parties, in which representatives from each country gather to discuss how the world is going to tackle the ever-looming threat of climate change. Since its inception in 1995, some major international commitments have been undertaken. One notable example is the Kyoto Protocol, adopted in 1997 and made effective in 2005, in which developed countries committed to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. A more recent example is the Paris Agreement, which was adopted at COP21 in 2015. The Paris Agreement required every country, regardless of their economic status, to make plans for climate change mitigation and adaptation. COP26 is taking place this year in Glasgow, Scotland, and over 30,000 people are expected to attend, including world leaders, non-profit organizations, businesses, journalists, activists, and more. COP26 is set to be a monumental meeting, in part because it was postponed by an entire year due to the COVID-19 pandemic. And in fact, there had been many calls from environmental groups for it to be postponed further, due to concerns that delegates from developing nations may not yet have had access to the COVID-19 vaccine, and therefore would be unable to attend the event in person. These same nations are also the ones that are currently bearing the brunt of the effects of climate change, so their voices are the ones that ought to be most prominent at the conference. However, ultimately, it was decided that COP26 could not be delayed any further. After all, despite the pandemic lockdowns, climate change has not slowed down in the slightest. In fact, it's quite the opposite. What's more, this is the meeting that the Paris Agreement's Ratcheting Mechanism is to take effect. Every 5 years, each country is supposed to revisit their initial commitments and set new, more ambitious, intended nationally determined contributions, or INDCs. In other words, by COP26, every country was supposed to have already started lowering emissions, and now be submitting new, even more strict plans for reducing them further. But the sad fact is, we have not come close to meeting even the initial goals we set for ourselves in 2015. The Paris Agreement aimed to prevent the Earth's surface temperature from rising more than 1.5 degrees Celsius. But the IPCC's 6th assessment report, released just earlier this year, states that we will now likely reach that limit in less than 2 decades. Even the new INDCs that have been submitted are unlikely to change this outcome. Many hope that COP26 will be the galvanizing force that finally propels world leaders to act. One major contending factor for this is that COP26 will be the first meeting since the USA has re-entered the Paris Agreement. The US President, Joe Biden, is expected to attend COP26 and make major contributions to the negotiations that will take place. As one of the biggest contributors to global carbon emissions, many will be watching the negotiations and assessing whether or not the USA can be counted on as a leader in stopping climate change. As to the outcome of COP26, we will just have to wait and see. Many expect to see greater commitments to climate finance, to help developing countries with fewer resources meet their reduction goals. Additionally, there will likely be some focus on developing international carbon markets, which will allow countries to trade carbon reduction credits. And, as has been the case since 1995, there will likely be renewed promises to reduce greenhouse gas emissions through the use of clean renewable energy and emerging sustainable technologies. But putting these words into action is the only way that we can make COP26 truly game-changing. Are you attending COP26? Let us know how it's going in the comments below, and thanks for watching!